Well, welcome and happy whatever day this is that you're watching us here today. This is Richard Rosen, Winnipeg's friendliest and Winnipeg's green funeral director out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. We welcome you. And this is part two of our conversation with Ari Brojde. And Ari is the president and CEO of Estateably. And it is a web-based platform working out of Montreal, Quebec, and they empower trust and estate professionals to digitize their practices through automation and enhanced compliance while facilitating practice-wide collaboration. So it's a mouthful. And for those of you who saw part one of the interview that we had hosted again with Sharon Hartung, your digital undertaker and the author of this super fine book, trying to make sure that I got it without getting the glare. So Sharon is going to lead some more questions and delve a little further into some other aspects of what Ari does and what his company does. And before we do that, I'm doing these things for a particular reason. And it's an area that nobody in the funeral industry has really looked at. We focus on the actual physical side of dealing with the deceased or pre-planning for things and in the basic things of burial or cremation and what are you going to do and prepaying it and here's a pretty urn and whatever else. But there's other things to it. And for us and for me in particular, this is a value added thing because people are discussing these things. And all of us have seen, I'm sure, a Facebook notification of somebody that said, don't forget your friend John Smith's birthday. Well, John died 3 years ago. And his family weren't aware of his digital assets, and nobody took care of those things. And Estateably works with other companies that will gather and manage your digital assets so that RA can bring the professional people together who you or your family might need to be working with, the lawyer and the accountant and the digital estate person, and bring them under one common area of collaboration in order to help you deal with the estate in a far better way. So with that, I turn the microphones over to Sharon. And Sharon, welcome again to hosting today. And Ari, thank you again for joining us. Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Richard, and welcome again, Ari. Always a delight to talk to you, and we're going to get right into the digital asset conversation at some point in our conversation. So just to recap on part one, what I really left with was I really loved how you talked about the fact that dealing with an estate is dealing with a network of people that may not have dealt with each other before, very much like a project. A brand new project manager is brought on scene and the team members have to figure out how to work together. And that's a great paradigm to think about this particular world. We're very fortunate in Canada, hashtag estate tech. We have some great hashtag Canadian estate tech companies like yourself that are partnering with other entrepreneurs in the space to address various business processes associated with the estate industry. Now, from a business process perspective, you're focused on the back end, the court processes, and the client or advisor's requirement to prepare and submit tremendous amount of documentation, regardless of the institution they're dealing with, to facilitate the estate administration process. And in part one, you gave a great example of the CRA tax clearance. Very much like any organization's requirements, there's a number of things that have to come together to meet the requirements to be authenticated and then obviously facilitate the process that they're requiring. Now, the work through to probate is not that visible to an average consumer, unless, of course, you're a named fiduciary executor or estate trustee and you're trying to navigate it yourself. So let's connect this to digital assets, because digital assets are now becoming part of our estate. And just like physical assets and physical property rights, transferring or dealing with a deceased person's digital assets involves service providers, their contracted terms of service, and also the basic identification of the user and account owner. So let's just launch in there and say, what are you seeing in the digital asset space, and who you're collaborating with to help clients deal with this?
For sure. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Sharon. Digital assets are becoming an increasing portion and increasing allocation in everyone's estates. We've seen a meteoric rise in cryptocurrencies, and I think that when I speak to the younger generation today, they're in fact more likely to invest in cryptocurrencies than in traditional stocks and bonds like we may have or we may do. do. And obviously the transfer of those assets upon death are a little bit more complicated than we have with, and I think it's a function of they're relatively new in terms of how people understand them. And I think that, Richard, what you're doing here to kind of showcase and to help bereaved families on the planning side of things, on how one can plan for how to deal with digital assets upon death is extremely important. And we talked earlier about how important it is to properly plan an estate, and we believe at Estateably that an estate well planned is an estate efficiently administered. And I think that's a really important point. So on the digital asset side, and I know, Richard, you've had, and Sharon, you've had a number of previous speakers on the show that are really focused on the digital asset, both on the planning side and on the administration side. And that's not been a real core focus of Estateably. As you mentioned, Sharon, our focus has been on the back office processes that we can optimize and create greater efficiencies in. And so, one of the interesting things that's going on in, I would, for lack of a better term, I would call it the death tech space, is, Sharon's been great at connecting all the different players in the ecosystem. And one of the fundamental, I think, benefits of technology companies getting together is that each of them have their separate focus. And through technology, we can our systems can communicate with one another. And so, and I think that's really the wave of the future. So, if you think about the life cycle during the planning phase, there are great companies that are out there that are really focused on how do I inventorize my digital assets while I'm alive, to make it easier through the administration process. Because one of the fundamental challenges is for the executor of an estate is how to identify what assets the deceased owned, what digital assets the deceased owned. And because things are paper, I mean, back in the old day, how did we used to discover assets? Executors used to go to the home of the deceased and wait for the mail to come in. And through the mail, they would be able to piece together the financial picture of the deceased. Oh, here's a bill from Rogers. They obviously dealt with Rogers for their cell phone. Here's a bank statement from CIBC. Okay, they banked at CIBC. I know I've got to call them and say that there's an account that needs to be closed. Here's a brokerage statement from BMO Nesbitt Burns. Okay, we've got to close that account. But as we go increasingly to paperless, you can sit and wait at the mail stoop as long as you want, and nothing's going to come through. So I think that these companies that are creating inventory management systems for digital assets are hugely important to create efficient estate administration. And so the strategy that we've used as the company is to expose technology that will allow any user of those softwares to essentially connect with Estateably and have that inventory essentially sucked in to our platform, so that the executor can know what those assets were, and then use other services that we provide on the post-mortem side to be able to effectively close those accounts, memorialize those accounts, keep those accounts going if that's in the best interest of the estate. So it's really that we're going back to the collaboration piece. And the nice thing about the ecosystem that's been created in Canada that Sharon's been so instrumental at creating is that we're all starting to talk the same language now. And I think that's ultimately going to be a major benefit to families and beneficiaries.
Yes, as you know, I call digital assets your memory, your money, and your records, because the term itself is not that user-friendly, and it makes it sound like we're all tech geeks when we use it. But the implication for the average person is exactly what you paint, Ari. There is no more paper trail. There's no more mailbox. Post-pandemic, prior to the pandemic, companies would offer, raffles and different ways to encourage people to go online. Post-pandemic, it's become the norm. For someone who doesn't think they have much of a digital footprint, you would be surprised with, over 70% of North Americans using Facebook. A lot of us have a lot more of a digital presence than we know, and we are using our email as the mechanism to receiving information about statements and others. And again, because we don't often get an exposure to the back end process unless you've been an executor, you don't realize that that executor not only needs to deal with the network that you talked about, but they need to know what you have, even the physical property rights or your physical banking accounts. And they won't be able to go into your home office. They'll look at a locked screen. Um, so with that, consumers, what can consumers do to better prepare their executors, fiduciaries, or the advisors they may need to engage? Like, how can they make the process easier? Maybe even save some estate expenses. So from your experience with advisors and clients, what is the top three things that people should know, digital asset or not digital asset?
Yeah, so I would highly recommend that they look into the various solutions that exist today, whether in Canada or the U.S. For managing their digital accounts while they're alive. There's and different companies have different focuses. Clocker, which is one company that Sharon, you introduced us to, they're starting to focus a lot on the cryptocurrency aspect of things, and how to make sure that someone's cryptocurrency assets can be transferred outside of probate through almost like a pass on death format like we have in the US, and have smart contracts, essentially computer code, distribute those assets according to the wishes of the testator. So that's something that I know Clocker is working on. We had a conversation with them, I think yesterday, and I'm very excited that, and I think that a lot of, especially the younger generation, those that are investing more and increasingly in cryptocurrency, can use Clocker or a similar tool to be able to be able to distribute or to facilitate the distribution of those cryptocurrency assets upon death. Another tool in Canada that's being used increasingly by professionals is a company called SideDrawer that has a very interesting interface that allows you to inventorize these things and enables the ability for an advisor to be named as a delegate, whether that's a lawyer, an accountant, any kind of financial fiduciary, to gain access to that information upon death. And the benefit of that, of course, is it solves the problem of, everything's tied up in emails today. You mentioned it's becoming an increasing part of people's assets. Well, we have stats that say that the average person today dies owning more than 130 of these accounts. And that's a tremendous amount. I don't think people can list 130 physical assets that they own. Maybe they can, but it's a different ballgame. And then on the kind of back, post-mortem side, a company like Legacy Concierge, which really understands what is required to do to have to get these accounts closed legally. And I can't underline the word legally enough. I mean, we've talked about this before, Sharon. Sharing of passwords could be a good solution, but it's in many cases not legal.
Right.
So Legacy Concierge has really been focused on understanding the various processes that are required by those service providers, by those social media companies, in order to have those closed properly and legally. And so, and I think that there's going to be a proliferation of these companies. And from Estateably's perspective, we're agnostic to which service people use in terms of the planning side or the postmortem side. We just want to be a facilitator to be able to connect those people and if they are using this particular tool, we'll create the technology to interface with those tools to have that inventorized as part of the deceased final inventory, and really streamline the administration of those accounts.
No, absolutely. I believe that the future is an integrated estate planning platform space, and that can be accomplished in many ways by, having an estate planning platform or life planning platform, or by integrating in some of these specialized areas, which I think is a great way to do it too, because it's more wholesome. You have areas of expertise like yourself, and you've named a couple of folks out there. So to be fair to name them all, if I look at the pure digital asset inventory vault space, I look at Directive Communication
Directive, yeah.
Systems, who are now in Toronto, Legacy Concierge, and Clocker that you've mentioned. And yes, Betsy is also focused on Lock It, which is if you don't plan in advance, you can come after the fact. And as I've talked to each of these owners of these companies, I find it's quite an extensive amount of work that they do if you pre-plan. And you're right, we have all probably over 100, 150, 200 accounts. And some of them are simply closing. Each terms of service directs what needs to be required, and they are keeping up to date with what is required by that vendor to close the account. And it becomes even more critically important for accounts you want to transfer. So say you have a loyalty point program that does allow you to transfer points, they are asking for, and appropriately so, the documentation that a financial institution would want in order to make that transfer. Now in the inventory space, that's physical inventory that are, handling digital assets to a degree, not the same way as the first three that I mentioned that are very specific about not retaining passwords so that they don't contravene the terms of service. Estate box, you mentioned side drawer and ready when, and then we have other innovation that we've seen in Canada too with the Hull e-planner, Jordan, and Notice Connect from Patrick. So we do have a lot of fantastic Canadian estate tech that is starting to meet the various business process elements of what's required. So for the consumer, again, any tips for the consumer you want to share, leave what they need to think about?
Yeah, I would again underscore the need to properly plan, and to speak with professionals that have the expertise in understanding what sorts of things need to be planned, to be able to identify what and be clear about your intentions and your wishes, because once that is documented, it's a much easier job for your executor and whoever and the beneficiaries ultimately. I think that's really the key takeaway there. And from our perspective as a provider of a software platform that deals with what happens after death, there's no more efficient way to have these estates being settled as when they're properly planned.
That's a really good point too, because the question I often get is, why can't I just use a password manager for that? But the difference is, and the IT industry does encourage us to use password managers while we're living to manage the large volume of accounts. If you aren't using a password manager, there's certainly paper-based ones, there's online ones. It is a great way to start to get a handle on actually how big your digital asset inventory is. And the
Absolutely.
tech industry is now recommending that we close accounts that we don't need, check our privacy settings, and do all those things. But the solutions we've been talking about today from an estate tech perspective, the DCSs and legacy concierge and the estate box, et cetera, take into consideration that important element that you talk about, wishes and preferences. They do take into consideration the state planning and state administration requirements, which are different than while you're living. So what are your wishes and preferences? You might not put that in a password manager, right?
Exactly.
Having a digital vault that recognizes the specific terms of service of a specific provider that does or doesn't allow you to share things in a certain time period is different. Authenticating the person that's your fiduciary and getting the right documentation, like the death certificate, is different too. So that's why these solutions have been emerging, because they do address the estate industry requirements, whether they're the professional team network of the various expertise that are required, or whether trying to address a specific business process.
And I think,
With that, go ahead.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, Sharon, but I do recall a conversation that we had, and this speaks to maybe the professional side of things, is that in the past they would professionals would often ignore the digital asset side of things just because it was so new and so novel, and no one really knew how to deal with them. But now, and correct me if I'm mistaken, lawyers in particular can no longer claim ignorance if they leave behind, or if they're helping to settle the estate and they don't advise the executor to make sure that all the digital assets have been captured. So it's not only important for the end consumer, but it's also important for the people that are advising them to be able to offer solutions, or at least advice on how to proceed there.
Yeah, we can't ignore the digital impact. The first and foremost is there's no more paper trail. So physical property needs to be addressed. We have intertwining digital and physical lives. So you might write a book, but where did you store it? Will you be able to get access to it? And then we have, new things now, and NFTs, cryptos, and we have social media and all things. We're the first generation to deal with a digital footprint in planning, and we would be remiss as practitioners in the estate industry by not understanding how to grapple with that. And I feel, as you and I discussed, it's the volume accounts that people now hold that is going to need to be managed in a different way than just a paper-based way too. With that, why don't we close with you telling us, Ari, how can someone get a demo of your solution? Where can they reach out and connect with you? And where do you hang out from a social media perspective?
I'll start with the last question. So I actually deleted my Facebook account a couple of years ago. Still have Instagram, so I guess I'm kind of affiliated with Facebook, but mainly on LinkedIn. I find it a great networking tool. And in terms of getting a demo of our platform, people can visit www.estateably.com. And it'll be hard to miss the book of demo call to action. It's on almost every page. So invite anyone who's interested in learning about our solution to visit the website. And if you're a professional and are interested in how our tool can help your practice, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Fantastic. With that, I'll turn it back to Richard.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Ari, for all the insights and the zeal that you've got for trying to bring people together as the professionals to help their client customers deal with estate planning. You mentioned Legacy Concierge and Betsy Ehrenberg, who we've interviewed. We also interviewed Directive Communication Systems and Clockers on the list as some of the other ones that Sharon has mentioned. So moving forward, we want to make sure that we're giving everyone a good opportunity to share what they're doing and their unique look at dealing with solutions as they see as they're coming forward. So thank you again for all this, and we'll make sure we've got all your links put on the when we post this, so everyone will be able to reach out to you as soon as they possibly can. And we look forward to seeing you in Manitoba too. Hearing that there's some companies working with you here too. So you're working on it. Good. Yeah.
Excellent.
So we thank you again, Sharon. Thanks for leading us through this. And again, just so that everyone's aware, we're doing these interviews just to provide information, because digital assets in this whole area of estate planning is reasonably new, and it's really to bring awareness. So it's by interviewing people like Ari and others to talk about their role and how they're making a difference in a positive way to help you plan your the estates, and especially on the digital side, and bringing everyone in the professional realm together. But we're not endorsing any particular companies, and we certainly encourage you to make sure that when you are needing advice, that you seek the professional advice of the people that are in your areas of expertise. So with that, we thank Sharon again. Ari, it's been great. We're sending you some sunshine. This is a beautiful sunny day in Winnipeg, so it's on its way. Sharon, thanks for sending it to us all the way from BC.
It's always a sunny day in Vancouver for sure.
Of course, absolutely, yeah. So with that, we thank everyone for watching. We appreciate your comments and questions, and we hope that you keep joining us and following us on social media platforms that these things come up on. This is Richard Rosen, Winnipeg's friendliest undertaker, your green funeral director, signing off. Keep safe. Thanks.